All right.
Now we get to the AC/DC story in the Bible. Dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
Uh-huh. Where did we leave off Sunday? Was it the end of chapter 33?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
Treachery of Jacob's sons is
So
next.
we are up to chapter 34.
Da, da, da.
All right. Chapter 34 is kind of a story within a story that doesn't really follow the rest of the narrative. It's just kind of an additional story that Moses has sandwiched in here to tell you about some of the ups and downs of Jacob's family. So far, everything that Moses has shared in this narrative has traced Jacob's travels and his progress spiritually toward God, which is why chapter 34 kind of takes a break from that and shows that all is not well in Jacob's family, that there's some other issues going on. Now, the one...
It also kind of provides an explanation for why he moves to Bethel.
It does when we get that far. Keep in mind that we have a tendency as we read through this to think that all of these events are just one after the other. There's apparently a significant period of time that's actually, goes by during all of this process. We see Jacob goes north and then west across the Jordan River, settles at Shechem, buys a piece of land there, and then as we begin in chapter 34, it almost sounds like, well, this must have just happened pretty soon after that. In all probability, there could have been as much as 2, 3, 4 years' time that has transpired at this particular point. And one of the reasons for that, if you look at the time Jacob was in Haran, the oldest that his oldest son could have been, which is Reuben, by the way, as he traveled southward, would have been, anybody want to guess?
13.
Yeah, probably about 13 or 14. Well, actually probably about 12 at this point, because you figure if Leah got pregnant right away, you give a year for pregnancy, you add all this up, Reuben would have been about 12. Now, since as we progress into chapter 34, we'll see that the villains in this are Simeon and Levi, which are sons number 2 and 3. What they do could not have been done by someone who was only 9, 10, 11 years old. So that in itself tells you that there's been some time that has transgressed. Figured it could have been a few months for them to get to Shechem, settle down, and between chapters 33 and 34, again, we're probably looking at as much as 5, 6, I started to say 3 or 4, but in all probability, probably about 5, 6, 7 years minimum.
Dinah would have only been like 5 or 6 when they started the journey.
That's exactly. What we're going to see here in chapter 34 is, and this also tells us why of Jacob's daughters, and by the way, the only one we have even looked at so far is Dinah. She is the only one that's even been mentioned. But as we progress on into chapters 34 and 35, we're going to find Jacob did have other daughters. They're just not named. We don't have a clue how many there were. Dinah is the only one that's named, and chapter 34 tells us why. Because we have a little special story here with her. But again, if she was only 5 or 6 at the time, this tells us that it's been a while. Now, in the events of chapter 34, in all probability, Dinah may have, by this point, have been only 13, 14 years old. Old enough to have reached puberty, but not old enough to in any way defend herself. And also at this point, you'll see part of what gets her in trouble is, well, basically what any teenager would do. She got curious and went to places she ought not to have. Now, that's not to say that the events of chapter 34 was Dinah's fault, but we'll see that she had to have been at least 13, 14 years old. So, chapter 34, beginning in verse 1, says, Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. Well, what would have prompted her to do that?
She must have a girlfriend.
Yeah, she's a teenager in all probability. I mean, again, if she's, let's be conservative about this. Let's say she's 13 at this point. Well, what do 13-year-old girls do? They want to hang out with other girls. And now we know, we haven't mentioned any so far, but as we're going to see, and again, we don't know how many, she did have other sisters, but
None of them would have been her age.
yeah, probably not her age, and also...
And nobody wants to hang out with their younger siblings.
Yeah, you get a point where your 13, 14-year-old girl wants to hang out with somebody else. So she's doing what 13-year-old girls do. She wanders off into town to go meet some girls. All right, verse 2 says, And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he took her and lay with her by force. Now, to lay with her by force, obviously, bottom line is he raped her. Now, you had asked earlier, why is this town called Shechem? Well, clearly you can see that Shechem is, at this point, not all that old himself. I think the best explanation for that is probably the founder of the town decided to name the town after his son. And by the way, as we'll see in the events of this, the likelihood that Shechem was a large town, not so much. In all probability, Shechem was probably just a small village of a few people. Because what we're going to see in this, there's no way Simeon and Levi did what they did if it'd been a large town. All right. Verse 3. And he was deeply attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. Now, how in the world do you force a girl and then try to tell her, oh, well, it's all because I love you?
Yes.
Now, once
Time
again,
to become tender.
yeah, he's speaking tenderly to her after he's just raped her. Now, once again, this is one of the reasons why I'm convinced that not only is Dinah probably only about 13 years old, but what does that tell you about Shechem?
14 or 15.
Yeah, he probably isn't much older, because otherwise, just read into what it's telling us. He's forced a girl to have sex with him, and then is telling her, oh, it's all because I love you. What does that sound like? The words of an adult?
No. Definitely sounds like a teenager.
He's a teenager.
Narcissistic teenager.
Yeah, a narcissistic teenager at that. Who probably thinks, that...
I'm important. Everybody loves me.
Yeah, because I'm the prince of the land. She wanted me. I mean, and I'm just kind of adding a little, editorial here, but my point is that you can just tell from the context of what this is telling us. Shechem himself probably wasn't very old. I'd say 15, 16 years old maybe. Old enough to do what he did, but young enough to still be stupid. And as we'll see, as we continue in this, real stupid. Not just stupid, but teenage stupid. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young girl for a wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter, but his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob kept silent until they came in. Now, this in itself is just loaded with questions and spiritual issues here. First off, how did Jacob hear that his daughter's been raped? Clearly he didn't hear it from his sons, because where are his sons?
The livestock.
They're out taking the livestock. Also, this is another thing that tells us time has gone by. Because if even the oldest of his sons, Reuben, would only have been, 13, 14 years old at the time they got there, and now the sons, plural, are out with the livestock. So they're old enough now, they're tending the sheep and the goats and the livestock. So at the very least, they would have had to have been 16, 17 years old or older. And if Dinah was about the youngest one of the bunch, of Leah's kids, other than the other son or two that she had, this tells us that they were probably, how old do you think at this point? 21, 22 years old maybe?
Yeah, if the youngest were old enough to go out with them to the flock, then yeah, they'd have to have been in their early 20s.
Well, now we don't know, the youngest one of the bunch, maybe not. Actually, there's only two of them that really come out in this story, which is Simeon and Levi, and they were sons number 2 and 3. Reuben at this point he's kind of absent from this part of the story. Reuben is the oldest. I'm just using him as an example because we know that would have been, it had to have been at least that old. And you figure Simeon and Levi were, a year, 2 years younger than him. So they're old enough to be out taking care of the flock. So now my question is, how did Jacob find out what happened to his daughter?
Did she tell him?
No, actually she couldn't tell him, as we're going to find out.
Well, they were saying that he wanted him to go get me that girl for my wife. So did somebody go to try to negotiate with Jacob for
that will
her
happen?
hand?
But we haven't been told this yet, but I'll give you a heads up on later in the chapter. They kidnapped Dinah. Dinah's not home, as we will see as we get later into the chapter. So no, they didn't hear it from Dinah. Apparently, my guess is somebody from the town probably saw Shechem drag her off, probably went and told him, but he didn't hear it from his boys, because also, keep in mind, the boys are out tending the livestock. If the boys had found out our little sister just got raped, would they just like, we'll take care of business later. We got to take care of the livestock.
They'd have left the livestock and gone running.
They'd have dumped the livestock right there. Say, nobody messes with our little sister.
Except us.
So we know, they haven't been told. So Jacob hears it from somebody in the town that comes and tells him. And again, but just at this point, trust me on this part so far, Dinah is not there. Dinah is still with Shechem, which we'll see shortly. But now the question is, if Jacob has grown in his relationship with God, why is Jacob just sitting there doing nothing?
Well, he's not that old.
Actually, Jacob has had some years on him by this point. Jacob's probably in his 40s by this point. Possibly maybe a little older than that. Could have been even pushing 50. Which, when you consider the fact that Jacob lived to be, I think it was like 120 or so, he still had some years left on him, but he would have been a good middle-aged man by this point. But just notice the fact that it just says he kept silent until they came in. He doesn't send for his sons. He doesn't go and, try to round up some people and go rescue his daughter. He sits there. Doesn't say a word until his boys get home. So for all that Jacob has grown in his relationship with God, Jacob's still got a lot yet to learn. He has come to the point he has a relationship with God. He trusts God, but he ain't there yet. All right. Verse 6. Then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. This is at the point where they go. Now, by the way, keep in mind, Jacob and his entourage don't live in town. They're near Shechem. They have bought land from the Shechemites, but Jacob still lives out of town. So they come to Jacob. Now, why? Because Shechem wants his dad to negotiate for this young girl who he's just raped.
Imagine they don't bring that point up.
Actually, that's a good point to notice. Notice as we continue into this, not once is that issue ever brought up. He's abused Jacob's daughter. He gets his dad to go out and negotiate for her as a wife, but nowhere in here is it ever brought up that they kidnapped Dinah and Dinah was raped by his teenage boy. Nothing. All right, verse 7. Now the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it. Now, well, when they heard that
Shechem wanted
the
sister.
that Hamor has come to negotiate for their little sister, and if they've gotten word, at this point, they've probably now been told why Hamor is there negotiating.
Right, well, it says
So
in the rest of
now they come in from the field, because somebody has delivered. How do you figure they found out at this point?
Somebody went out and told.
Yeah, the little brothers who are probably still, at home, maybe the 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they overhear this conversation and they figure, let's go out and tell the big brothers. Because what do little brothers do?
Tattletales.
Absolutely. They go rat out let's go tell big brother.
Big brother will take care of this.
Uh-huh. Now the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved, and they were very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. Now, notice there is no nation of Israel at this point. All there is Jacob's family. But notice how Moses has described this. Moses is already at this point referring to Jacob's family as Israel. And you're going to see this over the remainder of this chapter and the next one, that there's some flip-flopping back and forth, that at one point he's referred to as Jacob, the next he's referred to as Israel. But eventually, what you're going to see is that if they're talking about Jacob's family, then they usually refer to him as Jacob. If it's talking about Jacob as the patriarch and not just the family, but the looking forward to the development of the 12 tribes, well then Moses refers to him as Israel. Why does Moses refer to him as Israel at this point? Well, this is kind of a precursor to after the law had been given. This kind of thing was codified in the law of Moses as not only being illegal, but something that would draw the death penalty. But now, is there a law at this point?
None but what the local people have made up for
There's
themselves.
it. That's it. There is no law of Moses at this point. All there is, as Merrill just mentioned, is local custom. Whatever the locals were willing to enforce. But Moses refers to this as in Israel because we know from Moses' perspective, and again, who's writing all this? Moses did. Moses is looking at this from the perspective that Dinah, who's one of the matriarchs of the nation of Israel, was abused, and that sort of thing was just wrong. So he refers to this as in Israel as opposed to Jacob's family. Because, well, that just sort of thing just isn't done, and you definitely don't do it to the family patriarchs, and in this case, matriarch.
Don't you think something like this? He said, who told Jacob? Jacob didn't know. The sons knew when he came back in. But, you know, in a town, something like that happens, it goes through the town like wildfire.
Which is why there's a good possibility that somebody from the town, maybe one of Jacob's friends, might have ridden out, keeping in mind they wouldn't have lived too far out of town. Probably rode out and said, Jacob, have you seen your daughter Dinah? Well, let me tell you what's happened to her. And then you figure at that point, the little brothers, and if there were any little sisters, which we know there were some, we just don't know how many, would have overheard this. And what are they going to do? Let's go tell big brothers, because they're out in the field taking care of the livestock. Because now Hamor and Shechem are here at the door to negotiate for our big sister. Verse 8 says, But Hamor spoke with them, saying, The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage, and intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. Now, notice again in this interchange here. Did Hamor own up to why Shechem wanted her?
Nope.
No indication at all as to what Shechem's already done. And notice Dinah is not present to indicate her wishes.
Was the girl's wishes even considered at that point anyway?
They might have been, because, well, keep in mind in the generation before, when Rebecca was with Laban and they're negotiating for her. They asked Rebecca, do you want to go with this guy? And she said, yes, I do. So they might have at least asked. So, yeah, I think that their wishes would have at least been taken into consideration. But notice again, nobody says anything about Dinah's wishes because Dinah isn't there. And again, what really shocks me in all of this is the fact that Jacob is sitting there negotiating for his daughter, and at no time are we told that Jacob wants to know, where is my daughter? He's already been told by this point what happened to her, and then Hamor and Shechem show up to negotiate for her after she's already been raped.
Is God's hand at work in all of this? I mean, Jacob's sons do a horrible thing, but God doesn't want Jacob to intermarry his family with these pagans. And this puts a stop to that.
Well, what they do later does, but that's the next thing I was going to bring up. Notice what Hamor's negotiating for at this point. He's not just negotiating for Dinah for his teenage son. He's wanting, and by the way, this is the first indication that we have that Jacob's got other daughters, because notice what it says here. verse 9 says, intermarry with us, give your daughters, plural, to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. Well, as Merrill just mentioned, there's two things at stake here. Number one is Jacob has to make the decision at this point, is do I allow my sons to intermarry with the local Canaanites? Which he knows that's not what his father and grandfather would have wanted. Now, whether God has told Jacob this directly, we can only guess at. But we do know that God had told Abraham, not to be mixing it up with the locals. Now, is it possible that that order had been passed down to Jacob? Probably, which again would have indicated one of the
Jacob himself got sent back to marry with his family.
one of the excuses that while Jacob's running for his life, that issue of go back to the family patriarchs to find a wife presented the opportunity or the excuse that he had told Isaac, or rather that Rebekah had told Isaac, we need to send our son Jacob back home to find a wife. Well, there were wives there present, but what did Esau do?
He married the locals.
He married the locals, and what happened to Rebekah and Isaac with regard to that? They got, angry over that. They didn't want their son marrying the local women. That's one of the things where we were already told a few chapters back as to why they got mad with Esau. Because Esau married the locals. Now Jacob, who would have known about this, is faced with this same decision. I've got a guy here from the local community offering to hand over their town's daughters so my sons can have some wives. By the way, notice at this point, we're not told that any of his sons were yet married. None of them. So this is a decision Jacob's got to make, because unlike what we tend to do in our culture, remember back then, arranged marriages were the norm. Now, Shechem's begging his daddy to make a deal for Dinah, but that was not by any means the cultural norm at the time. Most marriages were arranged. Now, that's the one thing. The second thing that we see out of this, the fact that Hamor is saying, well, and allow your daughters, plural, to marry, our town's boys. What does that tell us about Jacob's family?
He's got more daughters.
He's got more daughters that we haven't been told about yet. We don't know how many, but there's more than apparently just Dinah. Which also, if he's been living there in Shechem for 5, 6, 7 years, he may have some young daughters that they figure, well, his girls are going to come of age in the next few years and we'll marry them. Now, we haven't gotten this far yet, but one of the things I'll give you kind of a little advance notice on, one of the reasons Hamor is pushing for this deal is not just for the women.
Jacob's rich.
Jacob's rich, richer than we are. And if we can intermarry with him, we can get our hands on his cattle. That's Hamor's motivation. But on the other hand, his son, well,
He's just starstruck.
his son Shechem, he just wants his teenage girl. Shechem don't care. He's just a typical 15 or 16-year-old teenager.
He's just overcome with puppy love.
Well, that's what he thinks. All right. We'll finish up this one section. We're going to call it a good stopping spot here shortly. All right. It said, intermarry with us. Now, notice again how he presents this. This is an intermarriage between the people that now are the patriarchs and matriarchs of Israel being given the option to intermarry with the Canaanites. As Merrill mentioned earlier, is that God's will?
No way.
Now, we're not going to have time to get into it tonight, but the rest of this chapter describes basically what amounts to a massacre of the entire town of Shechem, which makes us wonder that once again, we don't have any indication that God in any way instigated this. But God definitely allowed it to happen, because if God does not want Jacob and his sons intermarrying with the Canaanites, well, what have we already seen about God and evil?
Not real keen on it.
Well, yeah, but
He
my
has a way
point.
of turning it for good.
There you go. God, this is another example. We don't really think of this story as being one of those examples, but it is. This is one of those examples where an act of evil by God's people, or even by other people for that matter, God turns around and uses it to accomplish his will. Well, so this is the decision Jacob's got. Do I allow this to happen? Verse 10 says, "Thus you shall live with us, and the land shall be open before you. Live and trade in it, and acquire property in it."
Become one of us.
Become one of us. Shechem also said to her father, of course this is Jacob, and to her brothers. Now what does this tell us?
The brothers are there.
Yeah, the big brothers have now arrived on the scene.
It's amazing they're not attacking Shechem on sight.
Yeah, and to her brothers, "If I find favor in your sight, then I will give whatever you say to me. Ask me ever so much bridal payment and gift, and I will give according as you say to me, but give me the girl in marriage." Now, we're going to stop there, because beginning in verse 13, we're going to find that the answer that Jacob's brothers, not Jacob, mind you, Jacob's brothers.
Sons.
Well, yeah, I meant son. Dinah's brothers, thank you. That Dinah's brothers give is just a ruse. Now, notice earlier, when Abraham sent his son, or his servant, to Haran to negotiate for a wife for Isaac, who did the negotiating?
The servant.
Well, on the Haran end,
The son. Laban.
Laban did. Rebekah's brother. Then, what we have here is another instance where, even though Jacob is present, Jacob's just standing there, not getting involved in any of this. It's now, as we'll see beginning in verse 13, it's Dinah's brothers that do the negotiating. This seems to be a custom that pops up more than once, that the dad just sits there and listens and probably gives his nod yes or no, and it's the brothers that do the actual negotiating. That allows the dad basically to be the kind of the power that basically is the approval or disapproval authority, and leaves the dirty work to the boys. Well, anyway, Shechem throws this out there. It says, "You name the price. Whatever dowry you want for her, I'll pay it." Now, notice this is coming from the mouth of a teenager. Hamor isn't the one, saying this. What's that tell you probably in their household?
Son's doing it.
Yeah, if Shechem's only 15 or 16 years old, Shechem's apparently the spoiled rich kid who's well, we're already told that he's the prince of the town. Apparently he's the prince at home too. Because Hamor does not shut him up, does not punish him in any way, goes to Jacob at Shechem's request, knowing what Shechem has just done.
I'll go get you what you want. He doesn't punish his son. He says, I'll go get you what you want.
I'll get you whatever you want. Now, as we'll see, and it's not a matter of, well, maybe Hamor doesn't know what Shechem did. Hamor knows exactly what Shechem did, because, as we'll see in the second half of the chapter, they've got Dinah imprisoned in their house. They kidnapped Dinah. Hamor knows what's going on, but yet here he is negotiating for Dinah, and so now he's at Jacob's door, negotiating with the brothers, while Jacob just stands there. So they answer, they're the ones that are doing the negotiating, but as we'll see beginning in verse 13, which we'll pick up with that on Sunday evening, as I said, they've already apparently, before they ever came in from the field, they already have their plan hatched out.
So instead of disciplining his son and turning the girl loose, he goes off to do his son's bidding. So you're right. He's got dad wrapped around his little finger.
He's got dad wrapped around his finger. But the short story of all of this is what we're going to see here is a massacre of an entire town that, while in itself was an act of evil, God got his way by preventing the 12 patriarchs of Israel from being able to marry local Canaanite women. He put a stop to it. All right, questions this evening? All right, well, we'll pick up at verse 13 on Sunday evening. Mario, would you lead us in a